and get control over our monetary policy so that it's working for everyday people, not for the banks. A bunch of democracy reforms, I'll just name a couple really quickly. Get money out of politics. We can do that. And then people say, well, oh my God, then we'll have to pay for it. Well, the deal is if you make the public airways free, like they should be, because they're our airways, then it doesn't cost nothing. The big cost in political campaigns is the cost of TV advertising time. So you make the public airwaves free, and guess what? The bottom drops out of the cost of political campaigns. So we can do that. We can have fair ballot access so that it's not just the two corrupt corporate political parties that dominate the discussion. We need to get alternatives on the ballot. And as our host tonight here at the museum was saying, this is something that libertarians and Greens are fighting together to try to open up our ballot access and give people real choices. That's what democracy looks like. And when people say, oh, I'm afraid to vote for a third party because I might help the campaign, the guy I don't want to help. That whole thing, it goes away in a minute. First of all, it's a false fear, and I'll come back to that. But it goes away in a minute when you have a ranked choice voting system.
Yes.
That's also called instant runoff voting, etc., whatever you want to call it. It just means when you go in and you're voting for mayor or governor, for offices that just have one winner, you rank your choices. So if you want to vote for an underdog, that's your number one. And if you want your safety choice as number two, you rank it number two. And the way that the ranked choice voting works is that if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. Like, why are they keeping this a secret? They're keeping it a secret because they don't want you to know that we can actually solve this problem. The first time I ran for office in Massachusetts, we worked with some members of the legislature to actually propose a bill that would create ranked choice voting so that nobody could blame me and the Greens during our run for governor in 2002 if the Republicans got elected. They could have fixed it. We filed the bill in plenty of time that they could have had an insurance policy ready. Why did they not want it? Because they knew if they gave people permission to actually vote their values, they would be out of a job and we would be in our hands of government. So don't let them intimidate you with that fear-mongering. That's what it is. It is a fear campaign that's been engineered to keep you from standing up and using your power. We do have the power, but you know what? We got to be able to stand up for it and not back down when they say, oh, but you're going to make terrible things happen. The reality is the politics of fear has made all those terrible things happen. All the reasons that we were told why we had to be good little boys and girls and just follow the marching orders, and vote for the lesser evil, because we didn't want an expanding war, we didn't want more free trade agreements, sending our jobs overseas, undermining our wages here at home. We didn't want these terrible climate policies that were going to melt down the climate. What have we gotten, in the droves? All of those things that we were afraid of. The real engine here of social change and of progressive movement forward, the real engine is our power as we the people. We got to be able to stand up and use it and not blink. When we're on the firing line, we got to stand up and say that's why we're here, and recognize that the difference between the lesser and the greater evil is really window dressing. It's window dressing. It's not, there may be some differences. This isn't to say there are none. But those differences are not big enough to save your life, to save your job, to save the climate, to save our food system, to save our colleges and our local schools and our housing. They absolutely agree on the devastation that's being heaped on all those areas. So it's up to us to stand up and show the way forward. Just quickly to point out that the Green New Deal is absolutely affordable. The cost studies suggest it would be around $500 billion to create 24 million jobs. And $500 billion is less than the cost of the first stimulus package under Obama in 2009, which was said to create maybe 2 million jobs, maybe 3. Most of them came and went for much more than what this would cost, because they were mainly giving tax breaks rather than creating jobs. Tax breaks do not create jobs. It's a very inefficient way to create jobs. This would create them directly and would actually jumpstart the economy, start the revenue coming back in through the tax base. So this is a real fix. How do we pay for it? $500 billion we could pay for simply by downsizing the military, because that's costing us $1 trillion a year. Cut it in half. And we got plenty of money to create the Green New Deal. Tax Wall Street, you have, probably as much coming in. So we got money to all the other things we need to do. And enact Medicare for all, that too will save us trillions of dollars. That is a money saver, not a money cost. So cost is no object here. Cost is on the side of moving to a Green New Deal. Let me just skip through some of this other stuff. Make the point that young people really are the driver here. We talk about economic justice and racial justice. There's another kind of justice. Climate justice we hear about, and food justice. There's generational justice, because all of those injustices are being heaped on young people right now, who are taking it really on the chin for the cost of education, for the debt, for the lack of jobs, for the climate and food crisis that's really coming down heavy on their shoulders. So that is, I think, why we are seeing young people really standing up now and taking the lead in a way which is so incredibly exciting. Last comment here about the politics of fear. We need to replace that with a politics of courage. And in fact, it's the politics of courage that has always created social change. That means courage in the street, but it also means courage in the voting booth. Don't let them talk you out of the power of your vote, because it's a social movement combined with a political movement that really creates an unstoppable force for change. It's not having a lesser evil in power who will try to take little baby steps forward here and there, maybe while they're taking gigantic leaps backwards towards climate change and Wall Street bailouts and all the rest. It's really about standing up and insisting on the broad, really principled changes that we need now. So when did we see this happen? We saw this happen during the abolition of slavery, when you had a social movement on the ground to abolish slavery, which was absolutely incredible, and you also had political parties, in particular the Liberty Party, which was, a real driving force to raise this issue that we actually needed to have our elected officials, government, step up on the right side here. And the Liberty Party drove that agenda into the Republican Party, which was a grassroots third party at the time. And at times of great social upheaval, sometimes third parties get catapulted up. So just be on the lookout for that. And don't be shy about standing up for what's right, like the Liberty Party did, like the Women's Party did. And here you see actually an agenda for the Women's Party about why women were entitled to equal economic rights, rights over their family, rights to vote, which was at the core of the women's suffrage movement. With hunger strikes, pickets, demonstrations. A lot of people went to jail, and here's a sign that said, "Freedom for women to vote against the party that this donkey represents." So there have been spoiler parties all along who dared to stand up, and because they dared, they actually moved us forward. And finally, we especially saw this during the labor movement, you know, in the 1900s, 10s, 20s, and 30s, when you had an incredibly courageous movement in the street fighting for a 40-hour work week, for the right to unionize, for the right to benefits, for Social Security, for retirement benefits, for safe workplaces. Still an ongoing struggle. It's improved somewhat in this country, not around the world, as corporations move to where they can, you know, get the biggest blast for their buck. And we saw that recent tragedy in Bangladesh. You know, this fight goes on, and fighting for the rights of working people to unionize is a big part of this. So they were out fighting in the street, and they did not limit it to street fights. They had political battles as well, with the Socialist Party and the Communist Party and the Labor Parties and the Progressive Party and the Farm Labor Parties. They were fighting in the voting booth as well as in the street. And as this guy, Frederick Douglass, said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. That's why we need to bring the demand into the voting booth. If you don't bring it into the voting booth, it's not happening. And there are many ways to win an election. You don't necessarily have to win the office in order to win the day. You drive the agenda forward by simply standing up and actually casting a vote. Whether you win the election or not, you change the agenda if you dare to vote for it. If you don't vote for it, it's not an agenda. And I'll finish here just with the words of Alice Walker, which is an inspiration to me every day. When I realized this, it was just so uplifting and empowering. The biggest way people give up power is by not recognizing that we have it to start with. Poll after poll shows that our agenda for jobs, for bringing the troops home, cutting the military, reining in GMOs and labeling them so we can put them out of business, bailing out the students, making public higher education absolutely affordable, and ending student debt. These are all things that the public demands and wants. It's just for lack of knowing about us and lack of coordination that allows us to be held back. So, you know, in my view, at the end of the day, this is all about us getting together. A political party is how we get together, because in a political party, you've got other people to cover all the bases. You don't have to do it yourself. You know, you work on one piece of the agenda, and there are other people that work on other pieces, and we come together in a concerted process and decide what the strategy will be for the year. The struggle is a moving target. We need to constantly be revising the strategy in order to make the most out of the opportunities that are coming our way. And, you know, as Chris Hedges mentions, often, when transformational change happens, it always catches you by surprise. You know, you feel like you are absolutely up against the wall, and that it will never come down, and then all of a sudden it comes down, as it did in East Berlin, in Germany. Suddenly, on the same day, as Hedges describes it, that the democracy forces were saying, oh, maybe in 10 years. That night, it came down. So the more organized we are, the more ready we are for political transformation that will drive the social transformation. Don't stop what you're doing for a minute. This is about how we all get together to take back, you know, our democracy and to change this breaking point that we are at. A breaking point for democracy, for our health, for education, for jobs, for the climate. For peace and international law and security. We are at the breaking point. We're beyond the breaking point. We can turn that breaking point into a tipping point and take back our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future we deserve. It's in our hands. Thank you for being here to make it so.